Welcome to another edition of Carnivore Bites. I'm your host, Jeff Sherman, along with Dr. Eric Lopkin. And the big kahuna, the big news item, is obviously the State of the Union address. Let's face it, Biden needed a grand slam home run. Am I correct in that?
He needed a grand slam, and he basically walked.
Yeah, I'd give him a single. A single down the foul line. It was not, when Biden, the standard's so low, if he doesn't crap his pants, that's a victory. And speaking of that, he was getting out of Ash Wednesday, and a reporter it's really getting scary. His wife, Dr. Jill, basically pulled him away from the report. It was like somebody you do like in a nursing home. But yeah, so getting back to what we're talking about, yes, we needed.
He was up late last night, so he can't be functional today.
That's true. He was up past 10. Forget about it. Yes. So I think he needed a home run. I think he hit a single. I think it was also very interesting, the rebuttals. They've always had rebuttals from the opposing party, but you had a formal rebuttal by one of the squad members, and then AOC went on MSNBC and gave her own quasi rebuttal. That does not speak of harmony. It's not kumbaya.
Not only does that not speak of harmony, I mean, it is historic. The president's own party has never felt the need to rebut the State of the Union, but you had Rashida Tlaib do a rebuttal. You had AOC go after Biden. You also apparently, and I have not been able to find the video on that, a Democrat from Colorado did a rebuttal. So you have three different Democrats all deciding they needed to rebut the president of their own party.
I have never seen that in my adult life, and even
it's
previous
never
to
happened.
Adulthood. Exactly. Thank you very much. There were some funny moments before we get into some of the more serious. Nancy Pelosi, I know it used to be the party of youth and vigor. Now it's of senility. What was going on? She's standing up in an inappropriate time and rubbing her hands? The hell is that all about?
Well, there were a couple of things like that. She did that. The camera also caught Chuck Schumer standing up, sitting down, and then getting back up to do a standing ovation. Apparently, Pelosi, Schumer, several other members of the Senate and of Congress were given the speech ahead of time told this is where we need an applause line. Except apparently they needed a rehearsal because they kept missing their cues.
It was like something out of this whole administration's been something out of a bad B movie. You never would take it seriously. But yeah, looking at that, and then Kamala, when he said that we're at war with Iran, not Ukraine, she just cringed. I don't know if that was on purpose or.
Well, I don't think you can help it when he says things like that. I mean, early on, he accidentally said that the U.S. would not be sending troops to fight Ukraine. He then said that Putin will never gain the hearts and souls of the Iranians.
Yeah, that's it.
It's like he had no idea who he was talking about.
No, he's again, and that's with a teleprompter. But it was very interesting. He's negative 15 in approval, meaning support for approve versus disapprove. It might have moved the needle a couple of points. What do you think, Dr. Lopkin?
Actually, I don't think it moved the needle at all. Most of the commentary on both sides that I have heard basically characterize this as more of the same. He doubled down essentially on every policy he put forward. The only things that he pushed against the liberal part of his party was on defund the police. He stated uncategorically that defund the police was a bad idea, which didn't thrill the liberals.
No,
And he also admitted that, yes, they need to secure the southern border. He did not, however, offer any kind of policy changes that would actually do that.
no, that was just all for public consumption.
Right.
Yeah, I think it was interesting. I think it's also very interesting talking back to Camilla, and she was on an African American podcast, and you have to see this. She was like, "Let me explain this war. The Soviet Union or Russia is a big country, really big, and Ukraine is a small." It was like,
Yes,
what about elitism? Oh my God!
it was like she was trying to explain it to a kindergarten child.
Yes,
And
yes,
it was
very.
there's a debate. Was she being condescending to the podcast audience, or is she simply that stupid that that's how she has to explain it?
I think it's the
And
latter.
and I mean, that appearance and the State of the Union both showed a party completely out of step. Biden, first of all, refused to accept responsibility for anything that's happening. Now,
And especially in Afghanistan, which he should have had if he had any. We talked about he's not Uncle Joe, he's not lunch pail nice guy Joe. He goes, and we need to understand the sacrifice. I mean, any leader would do that, but he just glossed over it, like, it was just a bad day, no big deal.
he glossed over it.
Irreprehensible.
He did not accept any responsibility for his part in empowering Putin. And in fact, at one point, tried to blame the economy on Trump's tax cuts,
Yes.
saying that Trump's tax cuts only helped the top 1%. We've talked about this in the past, but according to the IRS, 82% of Americans got a tax break thanks to the Trump tax cut. On top of that, he tried to claim that the American Rescue Plan, the stimulus package that passed when he first entered office, helped people deal with inflation. No, even before this was passed, economists said this was going to cause runaway inflation. There was no runaway inflation before it passed. This was responsible for it.
Okay, this is a really earth-shattering concept for all you seventh graders out there, or maybe a freshman in college. I believe it's called, let me scratch my head, supply and demand. Too much money chasing too few goods. I learned that like maybe freshman year of college. Hello, anyone home? Yeah, so
yeah, it's
totally
economics
amazing.
101. And it's not just him, because in these rebuttals, both AOC and Rashida Tlaib showed that the progressive end of the party is completely out of touch with America. Tlaib's rebuttal was essentially a temper tantrum over the fact that America has been rejecting the progressive policies for over a year now. And this is not the first time this has happened. The progressives need to realize that they are not the majority. If you go back to the Clinton administration, for the first 2 years of Bill Clinton's administration, he was a liberal darling. They loved him. And then he got shellacked in the midterms and went, oh, if we're going to get anything done, if we're going to work, we're going to have to work with the moderates and Republicans, and he reinvented himself as a centrist.
100%. My only caveat to that is when you say liberals of 30 years ago, they were people that were not inside an insane asylum. It's a big difference.
Liberals from 30 years ago were not nearly as whacked out as
they're not clinically insane. No. And they don't know anything about anything. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
So you've got a party that basically last night showed they're at war with each other. They're completely out of touch with the American people. And something that most people seem to have missed, But I think this actually shows where both the Democratic and Republican parties are moving to. Joe Manchin was sitting with the Republicans.
Did not know that. That's fascinating, Lopkin.
Yeah.
That is, I do research before the show to get news topics. You're the brains, I'm the grunt, and I didn't see that anywhere.
Yeah, I caught it in a couple of places, but yeah, immediately after the State of the Union, several commentators, actually in a state of shock, commented that, oh my God, Joe Manchin was sitting with the Republicans.
I can't believe he hates Chuck Schumer, by the way, and I'm sure he doesn't have love lost for the other ones either.
I'm sure he doesn't, but this has got to send fear shooting through the Democratic Party because they know they're going to lose in November. Now they have to ask themselves, is there the possibility that they're going to lose the Senate before any votes are cast?
I think that would be the shot heard around the world. I think politically, being from West Virginia, it actually, I know he's been, since dawn of time, his family's been Democrat. I get it. But so was Reagan. And I think that it would be good for him. And I think it would be the shot. He did that for everything happens in politics for a reason. He didn't do it because the seats were more comfortable.
Right. And you also have to remember that earlier this week, Joe Manchin once again doubled down and said the Democratic policies have been causing the inflation, and he is not going to vote for any massive spending bills as long as we are dealing with this inflation. So again, he just shoved a knife into Biden's agenda.
Well, Biden, we said this, and sometimes you can take some credit for the carnivore radio. Remember, we came out early on and said, I said one and done. And you said one. I go, no, 1 year. I mean, I think he's very close to lame duck. I've never seen it before after a year. I really believe that. I mean, there's agenda. His agendas have zero chance. They're radioactive of passing. They had one chance, and that was it.
Yeah, no, his agenda is permanently stalled at this point. And
which means dead.
It's part of the reason that so many people expected him to use the State of the Union address as a reset. And some people on the Democratic side actually said, yes, he needs to reset. He needs to reach out across the aisle and say, all right, you know what? We've had a really rocky year. Let's start over. Let's talk about where we can work together. But instead of that, he actually doubled down on his own failed policies.
Yeah, and again, the quintessential question is it him, which I doubt. It's operatives that are ideologues. I don't think he has any idea what he's doing, which is evident by he just got out of Ash Wednesday, and Dr. Jill had to carry him away like something you would do at weekends at Bernie. So he's asleep at the switch. He had a golden opportunity, a statesman-like opportunity to say, we're in turbulent times. There's been some errors on both sides, whatever. Let's recalibrate. Let's work together. But absolutely anything but. And I think, I basically think that he had a real good opportunity, even to say something like, for at least a short term, we will open up American energy to get through this. So, because we're all in this together. But now he's beholden to the environmental whackers.
And that also, he did make one comment about that, and the world basically said, you're an idiot. He made the announcement that America was going to be releasing 30 million barrels of oil.
That's like 10 hours of oil.
Right. Europe was also going to be releasing 30 barrels. So it was going to be 60 million barrels of oil.
Which is a day's
now,
supply.
Now, realistically, this is about, it's a little more. It's actually a day and a half.
Oh, excuse me.
And yeah, but what made this so important is that he announced he was doing this to help alleviate the pain at the pump. What happened? As soon as he said this, oil prices spiked. They didn't go down, they jumped, and not by a little. So it was basically the world markets going, this idiot doesn't know what he's doing.
Exactly.
Prices spiked up.
It's like saying your house is on fire and I'm coming over with a glass of water. That's about what it is.
Yes.
So,
And the thing
go ahead.
is, our energy policy is important, and he completely misses this point. We are, because of the limitations that Biden put on our energy supply, we are buying oil from Russia. So we are funding this war on the side of Russia.
But, yes. But it also goes into the point of having a leader that actually knows what day it is. You adjust. Nothing's in stone. You've adjusted in your personal and business life, I'm sure. So have I.
Of course.
I mean, you're driving down the road and the bridge falls. You don't just keep on driving because you got to make it to your grandma's house. You may want to stop and go somewhere else or go another route. So he's incapable of adjusting. He had, something? What I've learned in my old age is sometimes when negative happens, they really represent huge opportunities. So he had a crappy year. You could have had friggin' Keith Richards in charge. It would have been better, but it had a great opportunity to repivot. He could have energized, at least until he screwed up again, his administration, but he just doubled down and said literally it was white noise. There was nothing to be said or heard.
Exactly. And of course, at the beginning of his speech, he's talking about what's going on from Ukraine. And this was a golden opportunity to unite the country. Does he take advantage of that? No. Because he's not a leader. And he actually claimed more credit than he is due about what is going on over in Ukraine. Putin has not been doing well. And Biden was actually trying to take credit. However, previously, in the past few days, he has actually used the term that was coined by Obama, leading from behind. Well, I hate to break this to people. Leading from behind is called following.
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, it's called not leading. There you go. But speaking of switching, you talked about Manchin. This is more earth-shattering, in my opinion, that border states, okay, you can say, the good old cowboy, Hispanics in border states are leaving the Democratic Party in droves. Democrats have some real problems. They have the problems that the Republicans had years ago. They are losing their base. Even African Americans. I mean, they're never going to be a majority. Never say never, but right now they're not a majority Republican. I mean, you get 25%, game over.
Yeah,
but
unless
Hispanics
the Democrats
fascinating to me.
Yeah, unless Democrats can shore up the Hispanic vote and the African American vote, they are in big trouble. And the basic problem is that so many Hispanics either have come from socialist countries or have relatives that have come over from socialist countries, especially Cuba, Venezuela. And as the Democrats are pitching these socialist ideas, they're going, no, we saw this firsthand. This is a disaster. We cannot support that.
Agreed. You hear that again? I'm not politically, but you're immigrants from Eastern Europe, Poland, and they're like a gas. Like, I left this crap, and you guys, I came here for the opposite. And what the hell is going on? But I think that is something that we need to watch. And why don't we conclude on this on a much lighter note?
Well,
before we conclude on go ahead.
I know where you want to go with that, but before we conclude, we do need to talk about what's going on in Ukraine.
Go ahead. You're right.
Because this is an historic moment, and not for the reason most people think. The war in Ukraine is not being fought by countries. You have Putin with the Russian troops, but even the Russian troops are not necessarily loyal to them because they figured out that Putin is not representing Russia. He's got his own agenda. In fact, there was a hit squad issued on Zelensky that was taken out at the airport in Ukraine. And the reason Ukrainian forces were able to take them out was because they were tipped off by Russians.
Oh, yeah, no, there's other reports that some of the fuel shortages were perpetrated by actually Russian soldiers puncturing gas tanks because they don't want to proceed with this thing.
And even more than that, where the EU and America have failed to put in proper sanctions. I mean, they keep giving excuses as to, well, we have to let him use the energy markets because otherwise the prices will go through high. This is being fought again by civilians. And again, not the civilians you would think. Yes, the Ukrainian civilians have stood up. They're fighting for their lives. They're fighting for their homelands. But you have businesses that have stepped forward. Shell Oil, BP, and Exxon all left Russian joint ventures, hobbling Russia's energy sector when countries refused to do so. The hacker group Anonymous has been having a cyber attack against Russia, and they actually hacked into the Russian military radio frequency and started playing the Ukrainian anthem so that Russian units could not coordinate their attacks. You have nonprofits who were active in Afghanistan to get Americans out of there, moving operations to the Ukraine to get people out. And even more than that, you've got American veterans who have banded together and gone over to the Ukraine to fight. There has been no question that Biden has been a weak leader. But who stepped up? Civilian forces. And in fact, while the hacker group Anonymous was blocking Russian television from using propaganda, the streaming services removed state-sponsored television from being broadcast, and Elon Musk provided free internet in the Ukraine and Russia over his Starlink satellite system so that Putin could not censor the internet.
Yeah, it's interesting. And the end game, which is dangerous for me at least, is Putin miscalculated. He was always the great tactician, the ex-KGB person. They always say we're playing checkers, he's playing chess. Number one question, Dr. Lockham, did he miscalculate? And could this be dangerous with this miscalculation? Because he's not a guy that's just going to walk away and say, okay, I guess I kind of screwed up.
I think it's very dangerous because he has been known to double down. But what I think is more dangerous, I had actually speculated this a little while back, and now I'm hearing people from Putin's inner circle actually speculating about this and former diplomats who've dealt with him. We could be looking at a situation where the world is being led by two mentally incapacitated world leaders.
Oh my God. Yes, we know the first and we know the latter, don't we?
Yeah. Both Biden and Putin may be mentally incapacitated, and that is a terrifying situation. And ironic, I mean, you have to question some of Biden's actions in this, giving classified intelligence on Russian movements to China. I mean, and then, last night in the State of the Union address, he announced the Justice Department was going to be investigating Russian criminal activity. 2 days ago, he shut down the same task force that was doing that in China. So God only knows what he's thinking. And honestly, President Xi has backed away from his support of Russia. I think he's looking at this whole situation going, oh my God, I need to stand back. China needs to stay out of this. Let them kill each other, and then we can pick up the pieces.
Exactly. And one of the things, hearkening back to the Cold War, which I grew up under, is it was always, I'm not minimizing it. I'm not saying it wasn't dangerous, but it was a gentleman's agreement. Brezhnev and others, even Khrushchev, I've read many books about him, Nixon, whatever, you name it. They go to the brink, there's Saber, but there were adults in charge. Like I said, I agree with you. Now you have two people. One of them has dementia. The other one's insane. That's not a good prescription for success.
No, it really is not. And it is a very dangerous situation. And I honestly think this is actually why it's such a good thing that the situation, for the most part, other than getting weapons to Ukraine, this is basically being handled now by civilians. I mean, yes, the EU finally came up with some sanctions. America followed suit. But I mean, they were very weak. They didn't hit Putin where he needed to be hit, and they certainly were a day late and a dollar short. And let's not forget the fact that this is the first time NATO forces have gathered ever. Those forces would not be in the condition they are had Trump not made the NATO countries step up and live up to their commitment to fund their defense to the tune of 2% of their GDP.
I would agree. I think in the end, doesn't this leave Russia weaker and NATO stronger? And isn't that a possible antidote for Putin's removal? Happened to Khrushchev after the 62 missile crisis.
Right now, there's a lot of speculation that people in Putin's inner circle are plotting to remove him because they're looking at this situation going, no, this is ridiculous. We've been isolated by everybody. This guy's got to go. Whether he does or not, I think at this point, the best case scenario, and this may happen despite massive casualties and an immense amount of destruction in Ukraine, but it looks like Ukraine is going to join the EU. They've already taken steps to do that. The EU has approved further steps. So Ukraine is joining the West. I think Putin is going to be completely isolated. If he's not removed, then Russia is going to be economically destroyed. China and Russia have been forming closer bonds. Given what we can do to Russia, that may actually be a good thing because China's economy is actually built on a house of cards. And if they have to spend resources propping up Russia, it makes it that much easier for us to take out their economy.
I would agree. I think it was a big miscalculation. It has a lot of danger in terms of, Putin's reaction, but it also has some things to watch for. Would you agree, Dr. Lopkin?
Absolutely. I'm hoping this ends quickly without much more destruction, but you've got to hand it to the Ukrainian people. These guys are not going down without a fight. Putin did not expect to have to send in an occupying force. Now, to achieve his goals, that's exactly what he's going to have to do. And little by little, it looks like he's losing control of the Russian military. So they may actually turn against him.
Very interesting. Speaking of miscalculating, we'll end this time on a lighter note. Major League Baseball. We talked about this over the summer and even 2 summers ago, how it was kind of, inching, crawling backwards to relevancy. They did some good things during COVID, but still I'm sorry to tell you, a declining sport in terms of viewership and demographics. Just when they're starting to make inroads, I think the World Series was highly viewed. They shoot themselves in the foot, just like 1990, which
Yeah,
they took years to recover from.
Yeah,
Billionaires
the MLB
screwing
strike
around
is
with millionaires.
exactly. And quite frankly, the only side that loses in this is the American people.
Yeah, but you mean as a fan, when do you get to the point of, listen, I have to put, bacon and eggs, on the dinner table or breakfast table. I got to work at a job that kind of sucks, blah, blah, blah. And these entitled assholes making, 26 years old, making 10 million a year. Totally. When do you sever the ties as a fan and say, listen, you're out? It's like for instance, I'll bring up like something like Mickey Mantle, or actually in the 80s, Mike Schmidt was the first player to break the $1 million ceiling. It was in the early mid 80s. I mean, think about it, Dr. Locke. When you're 26 years old and you're making 15 million a year, do you really give a shit if you win? I mean, I care, but am I going to really lose sleep over it? It's like Mickey Mantle. These guys are working 2 jobs.
Right. You care, but only to extent that it affects your bonus.
There you go.
But, this goes back to what we were saying about the State of the Union. Biden had a golden opportunity to bring the country together. Major League Baseball had a golden opportunity to reinvent itself, given the amount of inflation. Now, I remember after the strike in the 90s at Shea Stadium for the first, I think 4 months or so of the season, which is, a big part of it.
Yes.
All of the food at the stadium was half price. Given what's going on with inflation, cut your profits for the year, cut ticket prices, give American families an affordable place to have a good day out. This could have revitalized the sport, but instead you've got billionaires and millionaires fighting over pennies.
And by the way, little Jeopardy question: what's the average age of a Major League Baseball fan? 55.
I'm gonna guess. Yeah, I was gonna guess 50, so I was close.
Okay, 55 is close enough. That's 10 years away from retirement. That is when demographically, from a marketing perspective, you might as well talk about Jurassic Park. I mean, that's a really troubling scenario. And we talked about it on Carnivore Radio that Major League Baseball did some smart things during COVID. They were kind of a little bit on the way back. And talk about shooting yourself. If they don't get this crap fixed, they're not going to go away, but they're going to have some problems. Look at what the NBA. NBA was on a roll. NBA, it's still the number 2 sport, but it was like really on a roll. Then it got uber politically correct. A lot of people don't watch it anymore. It just sucks. I don't want to hear people preaching. Stop it.
It's true. And you know what? You need to take a look at what's going on in the world and figure out what your part is. Right now, where Major League Baseball, used to be, what was it? What was the old commercial? Baseball, hot dogs, apple pie, and Chevrolet.
Yes.
Now it's baseball, Matlock, Medicare, and diabetes. I mean, it's like
there you go.
This
yes,
is
and
not...
yes, and corporate America, because the only people that are going to the games are corporate boxes. So that's a real prescription for success. But we do our part in making America feel better, don't we, at the Carnivore Institute?
We try. Yeah.
So anyway, we're accessible anywhere. And what I like best is that listeners can now give their input, can't they?
Yeah, if you've got something you want us to look into, if you want to comment on some of our stories or commentary, you can go to xvadio.com/connect and let us know what you're thinking. And of course, you can get every episode of Carnivore Bites and Carnivore Radio at the Carnivore Radio website, the xvadio.com/podcasts website, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Amazon Music, Audible, and wherever you find podcasts.
Thank you, Dr. Lopkin. Great show. And thank our listeners. Take care. We'll be back next
We'll
week.
see you next time.